Hi all, it's Vas from Mythic Outpost. I'd like to introduce you to something new and exciting. Well, at least for me it's going to be. I'm going to start doing a series of podcasts relating to Magic the Gathering. These will include anything from deck techs to card finance and even touch on ways on how we run our business. My aim is to make these discussions interesting and something that you can listen when you're either commuting or use as background noise when you're sat on your computer doing work or playing games. So, without any further ado, I want to present to you Mythic Tutor, a Magic the Gathering podcast. For those interested in how the name got generated, really, the Mythic is from, obviously, Mythic Outpost, and the Tutor is from Vampiric Tutor, which is one of my favourite Magic cards of all time. So since this is the first episode, I think it's only appropriate that I discuss a bit on how I got involved with Magic the Gathering. My initiation with the game started back in 1998 when I was still at school. This was during the Wrath cycle set between Stronghold and Exodus, I believe. A classmate of mine had picked it up and got myself and fellow schoolmates all involved playing during lunch breaks. So basically he had made a couple of decks up and, explained us the rules roughly, and then we all got into it. So soon after that I picked up my first precon deck, the Mindgrain deck, which essentially was a discard deck with low cost, hard to block creatures. The reason I'm saying hard to block and not unblockable is because they had the shadow ability, which at the time worked similar like flying, in that you needed to have creatures with the same ability in order to block. I mean, nowadays you don't need to have another creature with flying to block. You can have creatures with reach, but with back in the day, the reach did not exist, so you had to have the same ability in order to block. So if you were playing a shadow creature, I needed to have a shadow creature in order to block, and vice versa, same with flying. Needless to say that my favourite colour in the game is black. This was a time when, for some reason, green as a colour was pushed, and they were making so many overpowered cards. At the time, one of the most popular green decks was the Overrun decks, which run a lot of little guys, and then eventually you reached 5 mana and you played Overrun, gave all your guys +3/+3 and trample, and that pretty much ended the game. So I used to run on the main deck. I used to run Perish just to deal with them. So Perish, for those unaware, is a 2 colourless and a black, which reads as a sorcery, which reads as destroy all green creatures, they cannot be regenerated. And at a time when Dark Ritual was legal, you could cast it on turn 1. At that time, 2 were the decks that I really hated playing against. One was White Weenie, which would pack all the protection from black creatures, and Circle of Protection black. What they would also run is a card called Light of Day, which is an enchantment for 3 colours and 1 white, which would read black creatures cannot attack or block. So pretty much it would be game for me when they would cast that at turn 4, because as a black player at the time I didn't have any artifact or enchantment removal if you were playing mono black. The other deck that I really didn't like playing was the mono blue control deck. It was your typical control deck that played a couple of creatures, loads of counterspells, loads of card drawing, and at that time you used to play enchant creature cards that basically would steal your creatures. So in some cases they would not counter your creature and you're thinking, what's going on? And then next turn, hello, I'll take that for myself. So yeah, typical Drogo deck that the point was that you get to resolve pretty much anything until they build a mana base to play their own threat and have counter magic and effectively win the game. The most boring deck ever. Another thing that's quite interesting is that my first Sanction event was the Prophecy pre-release, which Prophecy is a set that is part of the Mercadian Masks. So time-wise, that's like 2 years after I started playing. If I was starting now, I would certainly make the trip down to my local game store for a pre-release much sooner. Why, you may ask? Well, because I think pre-releases are one of the best Magic events you can ever attend. They generally tend to have a relaxed atmosphere, and everybody's so welcoming and helping to new players. I mean, I can't remember the countless of times I've faced an opponent who you immediately can tell is a new player, and after the game, I would sit with them and try to make their deck better, tell them about the lands, how many lands they need in their deck, probably advise them to sleeve up, especially when they've opened a foil Jace or something of that value. And I'm not the only person that has that attitude. I always see players doing that. I mean, the Magic community is amazing in that sense. You know, everybody's trying to help out. You know, be it a new player, being an experienced player, everybody's always so helpful. So if you're a Magic player and you've never been to a pre-release, I urge you to go to the next available pre-release, because they're such fun and amazing events. I mean, some of the best times I've had in Magic have been at pre-releases. I mean, I remember when Khans of Tarkir was released, I actually went to London and we did a 6 pre-release event, which started from Friday midnight and finished at Sunday afternoon, evening. So it was basically, I did 6 pre-release events in 48 hours. Another fun pre-release was when we went for Champions of Kamigawa. Now, at the time, Cambridge didn't have a local game store, so it was either going to Colchester or Norwich. So we actually ended up going to both of them that weekend. So on the Saturday, we went to Colchester. The event went all right. We finished around 7-ish, and then we decided to go back to the train station, get the train, go back to Cambridge. We look and there's no trains back to Cambridge. I don't know, for whatever reason. So we didn't know what to do. So we decided, well, let's go to Norwich. We'll find somewhere to sleep overnight, and then the next day go fresh and play in Norwich. Obviously, being a Saturday night in Norwich, that was not an option. So we ended up not sleeping and going straight to play the second pre-release, which my brother won 5-0 with no sleep. And of course, I could not possibly not mention the Betrayers of Kamigawa pre-release event. What was nice was that it was held in Cambridge. We used to have a play group, and one of the guys managed to make sanctioned events, so it was held in a pub. Now, the reason this event stands out for me is not because of my performance. I don't even remember how I did that day, but I was very intrigued about a specific card that came out from that set, which I was lucky enough to open one in my packs. So obviously it went into my deck. I remember playing around, it came into play, and the game was over in my favour. So in between rounds, I went around and spoke with a couple of friends who had actually opened the card themselves, and I said, "What do you think about it?" "It's okay. I've got it in my sideboard." And I was like, I think this is really good. So I thought, well, maybe nobody's interested, and maybe it will be one of those cards that will go up in value. So I thought I'll trade around for them. So at the end of the event, I had opened one, and I ended up with 9. So yeah, I ended up with 9 copies of Umezawa's Jita. You should look it up to see, it's an amazing card. So that's it for our first episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and may top decks always be in your favour.